Hi guys, welcome back to another video, this time featuring my low boost Clio 172 cup. So obviously the past videos have been more about the McGann because I've recently got that, but to be quite honest, I've been dailying the cup now at the minute, now that the weather's got a lot worse in the UK. Filming longer reviews and more in-depth reviews has become something of the problem with the bad weather. So this is just a really simple video going over in detail the exact modifications that I've done to my car so far. So let's get into it. So I guess the headline thing here is the turbo kit on the car, and that was done about 5 or 6 years ago now. So this turbo kit has been on 2 different cars. I've owned 3 cups in total. This is my 3rd one, and the low boost kit was carried over from my last car onto this. And during that time, it's been near on faultless. There's a little bit of play in the turbo housing that was identified by A&A Fabrication when he refitted the turbo kit to this shell. But other than that, it's been pretty good. And during that time, I'd say I'd probably covered about 50,000 miles in it. So yeah, it's proved really good. They supply, in fact, is just a bolt-on kit. So it includes things like the, I've got a little list here because I'll just forget, but you get the turbo oil feed pipe, which taps off the main pressure sensor, which you can kind of see in the engine bay that's already there as standard. So they sort of just put a T-piece in there and tee off of that for the return feed. And I believe there's another one lower down on the engine at the back of the block that you can't see that sits below the turbo. And then you've got a few other bits as well, such as the cone filter and air intake, which isn't standard. And that's in the same place that a lot of standard induction kits are on standard cars anyway, because it's kind of behind the headlight. Is probably the furthest away from the engine and the best place to put it. Other than that though, it is fairly standard looking. I think that's one of the nice things about the low boost kit, is that it does look completely standard. You wouldn't really look at the engine bay and think that it had been modified. For those that are in the know, of course, they realise it is, but the black hoses keep it looking fairly OEM. In terms of engine management, the engine dynamics kit uses a piggyback AEM ECU, which is fitted just under here, under the glove box, and you don't notice it. They cut a hole through the bulkhead of the car and then kind of splice that into the OEM loom. So it uses the standard ECU, the engine dynamics map, and I think the AEM piggyback ECU mainly controls air and fuel. So it's got larger injectors fitted, and it can kind of controls both of them. It's got a vacuum line off of one of the hoses to control or modulate boost, and in the past actually one of those has broken. So my AEM kit broke and it stopped working, which was causing problems with the boost and didn't quite feel right under load. But engine dynamics again were brilliant, they always are, and they changed it for me. That is pretty much it in the engine bay. I haven't got a differential, which I think the car could do with at this power. It's running 240 bhp and around a similar figure in pound-feet of torque. But yeah, in the future I may fit a diff to this. And it's got a Helix organic clutch as well, because not long after I had the kit fitted on the old car, this is the box and the engine from that car, it kind of, it just started slipping, which is to be expected. In the history, the car had covered 105,000 miles, and nowhere in its history had it ever had a clutch replacement. And yeah, you know, at the time it's probably 16 years old, and you chuck another 70 horsepower in a car, then it's built to deal with, and yeah, it started slipping pretty quickly, but that was easily addressed. And yeah, that's a bit harsh for road use, I'll admit, and it takes a lot of getting used to. In fact, everyone that gets in the car, when they first drive it, will stall the car without fail. That is kind of a fact. It's very harsh, it's on and off, there's no in between with this clutch. It's also been fitted with Powerflex dog bone mounts at the front, underneath. It's got an uprated Vibrotechnics engine mount on the top, and one to match, which is below the battery on the lower gearbox, and they just stop engine movement. A lot of people do this anyway. I find that the mounts that I've got fitted do transfer quite a bit of vibration into the cabin of the car. So if you're looking for a softer daily to, you know, kind of use every day, this might be a bit of a harsh setup, but Powerflex do now offer an insert into the OEM upper engine mount and gearbox mount. So they're kind of a compromise between the two. They'll stop the engine movement, but they won't cause so much transfer into the cabin and noise. But yeah, that is really it in the engine bay. It is as you see it. It's a bit tatty, it needs a bit of a clean, but I will do that in the springtime when the weather hopefully improves. And from the outside, overall, I think the car looks pretty OEM. I've got a K-Tech splitter at the front of the car, which has been rubbed down. It was a carbon fibre one, rubbed down, primed and sprayed black, and that is because an OEM cup splitter is a small fortune these days, if you can even still get hold of them. I think they were about £300 plus, whereas I paid £50 for that splitter off of a friend and sprayed it up with a £10 rattle can job. And yes, it does chip over time, but it's something that I can always take off, repaint. It's better than paying £300 plus. It saves a heck of a lot of money. Other than that, it's completely standard outside. The only thing that makes it look slightly different would be the Brembos that I fitted to it, which are from a Clio 197 / Megane 225, but I'm still using standard discs. And then the spacers as well. So at the back of the car, you'll see actually, I'm running a stud and nut kit all around from Pure Motorsport, but at the back of the car, the wheels are sticking out probably equal distance to the front, but the difference is I'm using a Pure Motorsport stub axle spacer kit at the rear, so you'll see the nuts on the wheels at the back actually kind of sit in further and the studs stick out, whereas at the front it's actually the opposite, and that is because I'm not using spacers at the rear. I'm spacing it from the actual axle itself, whereas at the front, to clear the Brembos, I'm using 10mm Pure Motorsport spacers. The brakes themselves I actually got off of another Thor member on ClioSport.net, and they were a relatively cheap setup. I paid about £350 with adapters, and they've been slightly modified to fit standard 280mm discs, but they're using adapters as well. And yeah, I've got braided lines all around. When I did the rear beam refurb, if you like, I fitted braided lines to the rear as well, but as standard you have to use braided lines off of these Brembos anyway at the front, and I think the 4-pots are a nice modification. They offer way more pedal feel. I wouldn't say they stop the car any better, because the cup weighs literally nothing anyway in the scheme of things compared to modern cars, but they're nice to have. Feel better, you feel more through the pedal when you brake, and therefore you could argue you have more control. In terms of suspension, the car's running standard cup shocks. They are new, so they're about 4,000 miles new, probably a year and a half old now, so I haven't covered a lot of mileage during that time, but it made sense just to put OEM cup suspension on it because it's relatively cheap to still get a hold of on places like Renault Parts Direct. And then I'm running the Grams lowering springs. Now, I've had Cook Sports in the past, which everyone raves about on these cars, and the Grams as well, and I'd say that they're actually really similar. The Grams also look cool. They're like a blue colour, so they kind of look a bit like Bilstein in a way. So if you're into keeping the underside of your car clean, they look pretty fresh. But other than that, yeah, I think they're a good compromise. Cook Sports are really hard to get hold of, well, they were at the time, so I opted for these, and I'm really happy with them. I think they sit as well quite nicely. I don't know the exact drop that they give, but the car's got quite a nice stance to it as it is with the standard Torinis on. I think perhaps you probably want a bit more of a drop when you go to 15-inch wheels, which is something that I'm looking to do next year when I start doing track days in this car. At the rear, it's got a Pure Motorsport anti-roll bar, like it's an addition to the standard rear beam, and it basically just stiffens the rear end up a bit. People say mixed things about these, that they don't like them, it makes the rear too twitchy, others really like them. I think when you get that, either you get used to it or you have it on the setting that suits your driving style the best, that is when they come into their own, and I've got mine on the lowest setting, I believe, and I'll have to check that actually. But I really like it. I think it does make a difference to the way the car feels to drive. As standard, of course, the Cup doesn't have a cutout in the bumper for an exhaust. I still have my original non-cutout bumper laying around somewhere, but for this I have used a 2.5-inch straight-through exhaust from K-Tech. It's the K-Tech recessed exhaust, so the idea is that it fits flush with the bumper. Mine does stick out a bit further at the minute, so it may need some adjusting, but overall it's a good system. It's not too drony. The final drive in the Cup is of 4, I think, around 4 with the Cup gearbox. So on the motorway it's reasonable, it's not too bad, but yeah, it sounds great. It sounds better under load than it does static. I'll put in a few static clips of it now, but it definitely sounds better when it's under load. So the only other things I guess would be the EPass conversion, which has been done. So it's a DCI rack that's fitted, and down here I've got this little module that I can turn up and turn down the amount of EPass I get, so you can go from fully assisted electric steering right down to literally nothing. And I'll be honest, I don't use it day to day. but it is something that I'll likely use when I go on brands next year, so we'll experiment with that a little bit. But yeah, that is pretty much it, guys. So the plan moving forward is to get this car track ready for 2022 and do some track days, and I'm going to be doing a lot more videos on the modifications that I do to it. So thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more content on Clios and Meganes coming soon.